Marcus Davenport had spent the better part of his career climbing from modest beginnings to the echelons of power. With a reputation built on relentless determination, unwavering ethics, and an innovative business acumen, he became the CEO of one of the largest multinational conglomerates in the world. The story begins on what appeared to be an ordinary day. Marcus had just wrapped up a series of high-stakes board meetings and was preparing to board a flight to another bustling metropolis. His mind was buzzing with plans for expanding his company's portfolio into new markets when, at the airport, everything changed in an instant. The security checkpoint was abuzz with chatter. Former acquaintances, fellow travelers, and minor celebrities mingled with the everyday people, each carrying their own dreams of arriving safely to their next destination. Marcus, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy blue suit and carrying an air of quiet confidence, moved steadily through the throng. His destination was the first-class cabin, his ticket, a reward for his continuous loyalty, littered with small details of a gilded future. The story of his attempts to sit amongst the plush velvet seats of first class had always been a personal indulgence, a moment of respite in a frantic life. However, as Marcus approached the gate, he encountered a setback that would dramatically shift the course of events. The attendant at the counter gave him a glance that was at once apologetic and resolute. "Sir, I'm sorry, but your first-class seat has been revoked. Due to new policies and an unexpected restructuring of our carry-on guidelines, we've allocated your ticket to the economy section." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, a spark of indignation igniting within him. Not only was this a proceeding mixed with an air of bureaucratic indifference, but it was also a subtle yet unspoken symbol of the systemic biases that he had fought against for most of his career. His mind raced, each thought coalescing around the core issue: how had the airline, an institution that claimed to serve all with dignity, taken it upon itself to diminish his status based solely on an arbitrary ticket allocation change? In that pivotal moment, Marcus realized that this wasn't merely about seat assignments. It was emblematic of a broader issue, a power structure that neglected the very individuals who had built success out of struggle. The decision cut deeply, each word uttered in monotone serving as a reminder that even in his 2-decade-long fight against inequality, subtle barriers still existed. The lines of injustice were drawn not in black and white but in a complex tapestry of corporate rules, outdated policies, and hidden prejudices. Having built an empire and worked tirelessly through opposition, Marcus now stood at a crossroads where his patience was running thin. He excused himself from the treadmill of discontent and walked away from the counter, but the determined look in his eyes revealed that this was not a slight that he would let pass without consequence. Combining steely resolve with entrepreneurial brilliance, Marcus reached for his phone. Although the inconvenience had already tarnished his mood, it also set the stage for a sequence of actions that nobody, from employees to world leaders, would ever foresee. As he dialed one number, his mind raced through a meticulous plan of action, each step building upon the realization that sometimes to bring about monumental change, one must first decide to confront the established, unyielding order head-on. While the announcement of his demotion from first class began to echo in his ears, so did the memories of every moment throughout his life when he had faced and overcome adversity. From an early age, Marcus had navigated a world that was not built with him in mind. His struggle was not one of mere chance but a continuously calculated and determined campaign against forces that sought to define him. In that moment, as he watched the boarding pass in his hand seeming to burn with acrid disappointment, he resolved that he would not quietly endure. His fingers trembled momentarily as he dialed the airline's executive hotline, a number he had memorized from countless interactions over the years when his reputation meant the difference between compliance and upheaval. The phone rang, echoing quietly in an almost theatrical symphony of suspense, and when a voice answered, Marcus's tone was as measured as it was dangerous. "Good afternoon, this is Marcus Davenport speaking," he declared, his voice laced with a controlled urgency. "I'd like to know why my boarding privileges have been stripped without any due cause." The voice on the other end hesitated for a fraction of a second, a pause that would prove to be as pivotal as the strike of a guillotine in any given revolution. For the person at the center of the airline's executive command line, Marcus's words were a preamble to a storm of challenges. There was no idle conversation here, it was a conversation stirred by frustration that had long been simmering beneath the surface of polite corporate interactions. "I'm aware of your policies," Marcus continued, "but if these policies result in discrimination or arbitrary denials based on factors you know full well have more critical influences on quality, then you must understand the gravity of this situation. I demand an explanation and an immediate rectification of this injustice." The airline representative stuttered as he conferred with his colleagues. Behind the muted hum of industry-wide quotas and performance indicators, a game was unfolding, a game based on reputation, power, and the inevitability of change. Marcus's tone was one that left minimal room for negotiation. It was an ultimatum wrapped in a dialogue of corporate decorum that came from decades of leading global enterprises. The representative's words, meek and predetermined by corporate constraints, echoed hollowly against the backdrop of Marcus's long and storied journey. There was something primal in the way he enunciated each syllable, a resonance that recalled the dignity of a man who had fought for every inch on hostile soil. The conversation escalated quickly, one party determined to see every procedural guideline adhered to, whereas Marcus was hell-bent on ensuring that no policy would ever compromise the dignity of his presence, or that of others like him. Aware of the gravity of the unfolding controversy, the higher-ups at the airline were alerted. Every corporate titan had moments when the meta-narrative of their existence was challenged, but none had ever felt as deeply as Marcus now did when he realized that the entire fabric of the seemingly indifferent system was unraveling before his ears. The conversation radioed through channels, reaching boardrooms and media offices in minutes, each echo of his determined declarations resonating with an audience that had long felt disenfranchised by outdated practices. Meanwhile, Marcus, reclining in the sparse comfort of his designated economy seat, plotted a course that would be remembered as a true act of defiance. Although his mind was occupied with the immediate injustice, his heart was already leaning towards the future, a future where every unjust policy would be rectified, and every small voice would be given dignity. Every moment of his life had prepared him for this singular call that brought about a legendary transformation. Within minutes of Marcus's call, the airline's crisis management team was in full swing. Executives who had woken bright-eyed and assured found themselves scrambling as the headlines of an unprecedented corporate insurrection began to build. Marcus's name was in the spotlight, a lightning rod of progress challenging centuries-old paradigms of discrimination and corporate complacency. Reporters from influential networks gathered, and social media erupted with hashtag campaigns advocating for transparency and fairness in air travel. In a matter of minutes, the seemingly straightforward matter of a first-class boarding revocation had grown into a symbol of resistance against the systemic bias that colored everyday business practices. Marcus's resolute words reminded the world that no matter how deeply entrenched an institution's protocols might be, one could always find a way to shake the foundations of injustice. The airline's CEO, Jonathan Pierce, a man whose entire career had been built on the maintenance of order through rigorous adherence to policies, was now confronted with a storm he hadn't anticipated. In his spacious office adorned with accolades and framed press releases, Jonathan's calm was disturbed by the relentless stream of calls and messages. Initially taken aback by the forcefulness of Marcus's outcry, he attempted to steer the company into damage control mode. But it wasn't long before the cascading effects of public outrage and whispers of regulatory investigations forced him to confront the reality that forcing a resolution by protocol might not suffice this time. Jonathan had to acknowledge that Marcus's stand was not a mere outburst of ego or petty temper, but a deep-seated protest against the negligence that had enabled discrimination to continue unchecked. Every minute that passed, the situation escalated into the realm of corporate revolution. As the crisis deepened, Marcus, reflecting on the memory of long evenings spent burning the midnight oil at his childhood home, felt an unyielding pride. He recalled the sacrifices of his forefathers, the brave individuals who had marched the streets with signs and slogans, demanding respect. For Marcus, this was not merely a personal battle, it was a nod to every single person who had struggled in silence. His call was transcending corporate boundaries. It was a symbol of hope and of the possibility that even when systems were so steeped in self-interest, one person's refusal to be sidelined could spark monumental change. Marcus's conviction had grown stronger than ever, and each word he had spoken was now backed by the voices of those clamoring for change. His reputation, built on decades of meaningful work and a passion for fairness, was unassailable as he led the charge in this fight. The narrative took an unexpected turn when news of the controversy spread to governmental agencies. Within hours, senior officials from regulatory bodies and civil rights organizations had begun an inquiry into the airline's practices. The airline, once untouchable in its rigid adherence to conventional protocols, was now a focus of national scrutiny. Marcus's call had reverberated through corridors of power, highlighting long-ignored issues of corporate discrimination. Every news update that flashed across screens brought the story closer to the people, who saw in Marcus a beacon of hope amid a sea of soulless conformity. This was not a solitary crusade, it was a collective awakening. For many, Marcus's act of defiance had become emblematic of the struggle for dignity in the modern era, a narrative that was as riveting as it was inspirational. Jonathan Pierce's attempts at rectification, though swift, were marred by skepticism from the media and public alike. Faced with a crisis that challenged the very foundations of his company's image, he had to adopt measures that were unprecedented in the company's history. The airline was required to not only publicly apologize but to commit to a comprehensive overhaul of its policies to eliminate the subtext of discrimination that had, for so long, been overlooked. Marcus's single phone call had effectively shut down the company's established order, demonstrating that even institutions built on decades of tradition could be transformed by the sheer force of principled assertiveness. Jonathan, in a press conference held in a hastily assembled conference room beneath a banner reading, "New Beginnings," announced that the airline would be suspending all flights pending an internal review. It was a move that sent shockwaves throughout corporate boardrooms and consumer trust indices alike. In that moment of upheaval, Marcus found himself walking among a throng of supporters and curious onlookers outside the main terminal. Their eyes shone with recognition, not of a man who had merely been inconvenienced at an airport, but of a leader whose actions resonated with the collective spirit of empowerment. The chatter among the crowd was palpable, a mixture of pride, admiration, and the raw, unspoken frustration of those who had long been marginalized. Marcus, usually reserved in his public persona, allowed a small, defiant smile to break across his face. Here was a man who trembled not with fear, but with the certainty that change was not simply possible, it was imminent. His call had not only triggered an upheaval within a major airline but had also ignited conversations about policy, respect, and the inherent dignity of every traveler. The turbulence of this moment eventually subsided into a period of introspection. The airline, now led by a new interim executive mandated by government-appointed oversight, began to review every facet of its operations from ticketing to customer relations. Panels of experts, including diversity advocates and civil rights investigators, were brought in to consult on policy reform. As the boardroom meetings unfolded, Marcus's historic call continued to be referenced as the moment when the course of aviation and corporate ethics was irrevocably altered. It became clear that this was not simply a reactionary collapse into chaos, rather, it was the painful, necessary collapse of a system fatally mired in outdated practices. Governments and industry watchdogs began to use the incident as a case study in overreach in administrative power and the dire consequences of sidelining constructive dissent. In the ensuing weeks, Marcus was invited to speak at conferences, to be interviewed on global broadcasts, and to share his views about corporate responsibility and the need for equitable treatment in every sphere of public life. His words struck a chord with audiences worldwide. He spoke of fairness, of the need for institutions to bow to principles of justice, and of the responsibility that every leader held when it came to paving the way for a future that embraced diversity as its strength. His story was no longer that of a single man whose personal discomfort had escalated into a powerful demonstration against prejudice. It had metamorphosed into a broader narrative about the intersection of personal integrity and institutional accountability. The endorsements that followed, from civil rights organizations, from industry leaders who wished to distance themselves from outdated practices, and even from those who had once been seen as adversaries, transformed the conversation around what it meant to be a fair, progressive airline in a modern world. On a chilly autumn morning months later, as the world slowly settled back into the rhythm of daily flights and scheduled departures, Marcus was invited once more to board a plane, this time to witness the complete overhaul of the airline he had once challenged so forcefully. The scene that unfolded upon his arrival was both surreal and heartwarming. The airline, now under a banner that spoke of progression and renewal, had prepared for a ceremonial flight. This time, first class was not merely a perk for the elite but a testament to a new era of respect and treatment for every passenger. As he stepped aboard, Marcus felt a swell of emotion, not of triumph over a past grievance, but of hope that the road ahead was filled with potential for greater, more inclusive change. The flight proceeded without a hiccup, transcending its previous identity as an arena for bureaucratic oversight and revealing itself instead as a platform for unity and renewal. While the tangible fruits of that day's transformation were obvious in the smiles of the service staff and the warm, human-centered approach to every announcement, Marcus's inner narrative was equally profound. Over the next several hours, as he reclined in a seat that once had been inaccessible, he reminisced over the years of struggle and the countless small battles that had culminated in this one singular victory. He walked through a kaleidoscope of recollections, from the early days of missed opportunities to the triumphant moments when every barrier had been torn down. Every single memory was a testament to the belief that one person's actions could resonate through time and spark a cascade of change. Each word he now uttered in casual conversation with fellow passengers carried echoes of his journey, a journey that was far more than the sum of its parts, deeply entwined with the hope of millions who had witnessed him take that fateful call. In the aftermath of this grand episode, Marcus found himself increasingly engulfed in invitations to speak about leadership, perseverance, and the precarious nature of power when used without accountability. Universities, corporate symposiums, and even informal meetups at coffee shops buzzed with the energy of his story, a narrative that reminded everyone of the necessity to question the seemingly immutable institutions of modern society. His challenge to the airline's rigidity had been just one thread in a tapestry still being woven. With an insatiable curiosity and an unwavering belief in his own ability to make a difference, Marcus continued to push for reforms not only in aviation but in other industries that risked alienating their most valued stakeholders, the people. His actions had ignited a slow-burning revolution, one that many critics conceded was long overdue. For Marcus, the legacy of that day was not solely defined by the internal policies of one airline or the public relations fiasco it unleashed. It became a cornerstone for transforming how companies looked at service, justice, and most importantly, dignity. This transformation, painted against a backdrop of change across industries all over the globe, soon became emblematic of a new era where corporate lives were no longer administered with cold indifference but with a human touch. The call he made that fateful afternoon was not an isolated event but rather the spark that triggered an essential, if overdue, recalibration of priorities among global business leaders. His journey, marked by moments of silent introspection and roaring declarations of resistance, became a blueprint for a future where every decision was measured not merely in profit margins but in the quality of respect and fairness it afforded to all. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, as a sense of order gently was restored to the airline industry, Marcus spent time reflecting on his own evolution both as a CEO and as an individual. Each recollection, mingled with the newfound narrative of change he had helped spark, reinforced that true leadership was measured not by the ease of today but by the integrity of one's convictions amidst resistance. In long, contemplative walks through city parks and during late-night encounters with friends from diverse walks of life, he found that the path to lasting transformation was paved with small acts of courage, the same courage he had summoned at that moment when injustice reared its head like an unwelcome storm. That singular, defiant call had become a beacon, urging both the privileged and the disenfranchised to rise above routine roles and insist on a more transparent, empathetic way of engaging with the world. It was during a quiet dinner at a downtown restaurant, surrounded by old friends and upcoming visionaries in the world of business, that Marcus was asked what he believed was the secret behind turning personal adversity into global change. His reply was thoughtful and resonated with the raw honesty of someone who had seen the best and worst of human determination. Every moment of injustice, he explained softly, is an opportunity in disguise. It is a call to arms for those who believe that no single person should bear the weight of systemic failure alone. That day, when my dignity was questioned over a seat assignment, what I truly experienced was a mirror reflecting every injustice faced by countless souls. It was not about a lost luxury, it was about our right to be valued as human beings. The candle on the table flickered, and his voice, softened by sincerity, continued as if speaking to an unseen audience far beyond the walls of that humble restaurant. Maybe one day, a single call, a person's insistence on justice, will be enough to turn even the mightiest empires into relics of a time when compassion was collateral. And until that day, we must all hold our ground, speak our truths, and never let our dignity be dismissed. That night, as the city lights shimmered through the window, Marcus's narrative, imbued with deeper meaning, became a rallying point for reformers from every corner of society. The flight incident had transcended the realm of personal grievance and become the embodiment of a broader movement, one where structural reform was not only necessary but inevitable. From boardrooms to living rooms, the conversation was evolving rapidly, as people began to question long-standing procedures that had allowed inequality to thrive. The power of individual action became a cherished truth. Marcus had not just sat in a plain seat, he had seated a revolution in motion. Weeks turned into months as the reverberations of that single call settled into a tangible legacy. Public discourse shifted its focus toward accountability and equity. Major airlines scrambled to update their protocols, customers demanded more than just punctual departures, they insisted on transparency, fairness, and warmth in every interaction. Other industries took note. Corporate think tanks organized symposiums on the ethics of leadership, and political reformers started drafting legislation echoing Marcus's demand for treating every individual with respect. The fallout was not instantaneous, and while change often takes time, the transformative power of a single thought-out decision was now undeniable in the collective consciousness of an evolving society. It was a lesson in the value of questioning the status quo, a reminder that resistance, when anchored in genuine conviction, could educate, inspire, and ultimately transform empires of indifference into bastions of equality. Even as the world moved forward, Marcus never lost the humility that had carried him through his early struggles. Despite the accolades, media attention, and the transformation he had initiated, he remained grounded in the simple belief that every individual deserved dignity. In a quiet conversation with one of his closest aides, he remarked, "I only did what anyone with a decent heart should do." It's not about one flight or one class, it's about affirming that every single human being matters. The journey ahead is long and uncertain, but today, we have taken one important step towards a world where no injustice is too small to challenge. His words, as measured as they were sincere, seemed to encapsulate the essence of countless stories that had woven together to form a tapestry of change. Time, as it often does, brought healing and progress. Gradually, the incidents that once captivated headlines gave way to a broader, more nuanced dialogue on human rights and corporate accountability. Marcus's achievement sparked a series of reforms in industries beyond aviation, culminating in a ripple effect that transformed customer service standards across the board. His voice, both gentle and assertive, continued to inspire not only those in boardrooms but also everyday individuals who yearned for a greater say in how institutions treated them. His narrative was woven into the fabric of modern corporate ethics, an elegant yet powerful reminder that even in a world dominated by efficiency and profit, the worth of a human soul remains priceless. As the years passed, Marcus attended various inaugurations and witnessed firsthand the evolution of policies that had once been criticized for their lack of empathy. There were moments when the stakes of his journey were recalled in hushed reverence at conferences, and scholars frequently referenced his transformative call as a turning point in the fight against systemic discrimination, both in transportation and in broader corporate frameworks. The day that began with a revoked boarding pass thus transcended its immediate inconvenience to become a living lesson on the importance of standing up when wronged. In a quiet interview on a nationally acclaimed program, Marcus recounted that incident with a mix of humor and profound insight. "I realize now that every obstacle, no matter how minor it may seem, carries within it the seed of revolution if handled with courage and conviction. That call did not just end an unfair boarding process, it ended a complacency that had been allowed to persist for too long. On the anniversary of that fateful day, a group of young entrepreneurs dedicated an innovation summit to the very idea of questioning the status quo, a summit that was inspired by Marcus's personal tale of defiance and success. The hall, filled with the eagerly listening voices of tomorrow's vanguards, echoed with discussions on future technology, new ways of thinking about customer interaction, and, above all, the importance of rooting out inequality wherever it was found. Marcus, invited as the keynote speaker, addressed the room with an authentic fervor that made each word seem like a call to arms against injustice. His eyes shone with the memories of battles fought and the hope for victories yet to come. "We are the architects of our future," he declared, "and today, I urge you to be not just builders, but guardians of fairness and equity. Every time you face injustice, remember that you have the power to transform institutions. Our voices, united in purpose and resilience, can rewrite the narratives of even the most entrenched systems." The room erupted in applause, every clapping hand a silent pledge to carry forward the torch of change that Marcus had ignited with a single, simple act. In personal moments of solitude, Marcus often reflected on the unexpected journey that had stemmed from what many had assumed would be a minor inconvenience. His home, filled with family photos, tokens of achievements, and artifacts of past ventures, now held a special place for memorabilia from that day, a crumpled boarding pass, a handwritten note, and the faded recording of that pivotal phone call. Though time had polished his corporate image, the raw emotion of that day remained etched in his heart. It was a constant reminder that every action, no matter how small, resonated in ways one could never truly predict. The lesson was clear: trust your inner voice, stand up when wronged, and understand that the ripples you create may one day become waves of change. Marcus's legacy went far beyond the boardroom and even beyond executive leadership. He became a mentor to countless young professionals who saw in him not just a successful businessman but a revolutionary who had dared to challenge norms for the sake of justice. His story was included in business schools' curricula and discussed in seminars that preached the importance of empathy in leadership. New corporate policies, which once had been solely about bottom-line metrics, were now crafted with a strong dose of human sensitivity, a lesson that owed its inspiration to the day an ordinary flight became a turning point in the annals of corporate reform. The journey was not without sacrifice. As corporate infighting subsided and the new norms began to take shape, Marcus continued to face entrenched opposition from those who clung to the old ways. There were board meetings that ended in frustration, proposal rejections that stung, and moments when the old guard tried to undermine the reforms that had been set in motion. Yet each challenge, each minor setback, was met with a stoic resolve. Marcus maintained that true progress was never a straight line, and that every obstacle was an opportunity to reaffirm one's commitment to changing the system for the better. His voice, steady as ever, continued to advocate for a world where every person was recognized not just for their title, but for their human dignity, a world where a single call could indeed shut down outdated institutions and pave the way for a better tomorrow. Looking back on that transformative day, Marcus could hardly believe that such profound change had been initiated by an act that many would have dismissed as trivial. He knew that something had shifted in the collective mindset, a shift that began with his insistence on fairness and integrity. As he reviewed the countless articles, letters of appreciation, and testimonies from people whose lives had been changed by the reformative wave, he found solace in the thought that perhaps, just maybe, his small act of defiance had sparked a revolution greater than anything he could have ever imagined. As dusk approached on yet another day filled with promise, Marcus sat alone at his favorite park bench, thinking back to that fateful moment at the airport. The soft rustle of the wind mingled with distant laughter and the hum of city life, creating a symphony of everyday humanity. Here, in the gentle embrace of twilight, his mind wandered over the countless moments that had defined his journey. Every obstacle, every hard-fought victory, not unlike that singular call, reminded him of the resilience of those who believe in justice. In this reflective solitude, Marcus vowed to continue his mission, to fight complacency, challenge unjust norms, and nurture a system that placed human values above corporate expedience. The world, it seemed, was slowly but inexorably transforming. And while there were still battles to be fought, every change, every reform, was a step towards the ethos that Marcus had long championed. His story, now part of a larger narrative, resonated with people from all walks of life. It was a reminder that even those who seemed at the pinnacle of power were not immune to the everyday struggles of those who faced discrimination. Marcus's legacy was a beacon of hope, a testament to the idea that one person's voice, when fueled by truth and conviction, could initiate a cascade of change that reverberated far beyond the confines of any single institution. Over time, as the once contentious airline rebranded and reformed every facet of its operations, Marcus found himself invited to events celebrating corporate transformation. He attended charity galas, roundtable discussions with government officials, and even international conferences where his insights on leadership were shared with audiences hungry for a new way forward. Each event, each handshake, and every word he spoke carried the echo of that day when a first-class seat had been denied, only to be transformed into the catalyst for an enduring movement of fairness and respect. His ideas spread, not through forced mandates, but through the gentle ripple of genuine influence, a legacy that inspired entire generations to stand up in the face of injustice. On an ordinary morning, as the city buzzed with its usual fervor, Marcus found himself once more at the airport. This time, however, the transformation was evident in every smiling face and courteous interaction. The representatives at the check-in counters wore expressions of warmth and respect, and every ticket printed bore a clear message: "You are valued." As Marcus calmly proceeded to his newly designated first-class seat, a seat that was no longer a privilege but a default for every paying traveler, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on the long journey that had led to this serene arrival. It was a moment of silent gratitude for all those who had contributed to the change, including the voices of dissent that he had so passionately championed. At that precise moment, as the plane ascended into clear skies under a banner of reform, Marcus Davenport's mission was clear. He had set out to challenge a system that saw fit to deny a simple dignity and, in doing so, had disrupted an established order. His call, which had once seemed like a small ripple in the vast ocean of corporate bureaucracy, had turned into a tidal wave of transformation. His legacy, forever immortalized in the annals of corporate history, then became an enduring reminder that every single voice counts, and that one act of bravery can indeed ignite a revolution. In the end, the story of the call was not merely about a principal who had once been denied his first-class seat. It was a story about the importance of standing up for oneself and others, regardless of the power imbalances that may exist. It was a tale that wove together the lives of everyday travelers and top-level executives, each bound by a shared desire for dignity, justice, and respect. The legacy of Marcus's call lived on long after the headlines faded, a constant reminder that no matter how towering the walls of tradition might seem, they can always be brought down by determination and courage. And so, as the plane soared across the horizon, with its engines echoing the promise of a new day, Marcus Davenport allowed himself to smile in quiet satisfaction. The journey was far from over, and there were certainly more battles on the horizon, but one thing was abundantly clear: every single call, every single act of defiance driven by truth, had the power to reshape the world, one policy at a time. In that truth lay the hope for a future of boundless possibilities, a future where every person, regardless of their background or status, would never again have to fight for the dignity they inherently deserved. Every once in a while, when the hustle of corporate ambition grew too loud, Marcus would return to that memory, of a day when he was denied a privilege that many took for granted yet was laden with deep, unspoken significance. In that memory, he found strength in knowing that sometimes, upending the status quo was the only way to forge a path to a just and inclusive future. And in that realization, the story of his call, and the transformation it heralded, continued to resonate through every corridor of power, every airline terminal, and every heart that yearned for a world where respect and justice reigned supreme. The narrative, intricately woven with moments of quiet introspection, passionate oratory, and resolute action, served as a living testament to the fact that progress often begins with a single, bold act. Marcus's unyielding stance on fairness had illuminated a path forward for countless others who had long been marginalized by the rigid confines of tradition. His determination to transform frustration into action was a lesson for all, that one voice, when raised in the spirit of justice, could dismantle even the most deeply entrenched structures of inequality. Over time, the story of that fateful day became a part of modern folklore, a reminder that every injustice, no matter how seemingly small, deserved to be challenged and overcome. And as the world continued to evolve, embracing new norms and policies founded on empathy and accountability, Marcus's famous call echoed as a symbol of what true leadership entailed. It was a call not just for change, but for an ongoing commitment to ensuring that every person was valued as more than a number or a protocol-driven statistic. Amid the whirlwind of progress, Marcus remained ever mindful of his humble origins, the long nights spent wrestling with adversity, and the myriad small victories that had built the foundation for his success. His story was interlaced with international accolades, academic lectures, and fervent debates over policies, a sprawling tapestry of human resilience and relentless pursuit of dignity. And though his name would forever be linked with the boardroom upheaval that shook an entire industry, the deeper truth lay in the simple fact that he had chosen to fight for what was right, not for personal gain, not for glory, but for the betterment of a system that too often failed those who needed it most. In quiet moments of reflection, surrounded by memorabilia from a lifetime of challenges and achievements, Marcus's eyes would stray to a framed photograph of that day. There, amidst the glare of harsh airport lights and sealed envelopes of corporate memos, was the reminder that one call had shattered the confines of convention. It was a reminder that the currency of true leadership was not wealth or status, but the unwavering belief in humanity's ability to overcome even the toughest injustices. That belief, echoed in every heartfelt conversation and every policy reformed, remained an indelible part of his journey, a journey that had ignited a revolution in the hearts and minds of countless individuals around the world. As dusk fell on that day's flight and the plane neared its destination, Marcus Davenport sat quietly and observed the world outside the window, a world filled with hope and the promise of change. He leaned back into his seat, now equipped with the comfort that only true fairness can bestow, and allowed himself a moment of quiet contentment. His journey, which had begun with the indignity of a denied first-class boarding, had transformed into a beacon for progress, a dramatic yet deeply human tale of resistance, redemption, and renewal. And so, as the aircraft touched down at a runway that symbolized both arrival and a new beginning, Marcus stepped off the plane with an unspoken message resonating in his heart. Every injustice that had occurred that day was now a memory that fueled future endeavors toward a fairer world. His call had ended an era of archaic policies and ushered in a remarkable period of introspection and reform, one that would forever remind the world that the courage to speak up could dismantle even the most formidable institutions of inequality. The legacy of Marcus Davenport's profound experience continues to ripple across time, celebrated not merely as a singular episode in corporate history, but as a living call to action. Every new board meeting, every customer inquiry, and every moment of quiet resistance is imbued with the knowledge that each step toward dignity counts in the grand tapestry of progress. And so, as the sun rose on yet another day laden with promise, the symphony of voices calling for justice grew louder, each one a note in the anthem of change that Marcus had helped compose with his single, transformative call. In that melodic chorus of determination and hope, the old systems were replaced by a contemporary vision of fairness and respect. The future was, after all, not determined solely by the legacy of power or tradition, but by the relentless pursuit of a more humane and equitable world. And as the dialogues continued in boardrooms, public forums, and international summits, the spirit of Marcus's unyielding defiance remained, a shining testament to the fact that every person, when driven by conviction, could indeed transform the world one call at a time. Each chapter of this unfolding story serves as a reminder that progress is the sum total of small, brave acts woven together into an unbreakable fabric of hope. Marcus Davenport's story, from the moment his first-class seat was retroactively reassigned to the day when an entire airline was compelled to rethink its policies, stands as a saga of renewal. It is a narrative that insists that when one touches the core of human dignity, nothing can stand in the way of the transformation it ignites, a transformation that is as enduring as it is revolutionary. And now, as the tale of Marcus's seminal call is recounted once more to audiences eager for change, the moral of the story resonates with renewed vigor. Each whispered recollection, every inspired conversation at coffee shops and corporate conferences alike, stands as a tribute to a day when the course of an industry was permanently altered by one man determined to reclaim what was rightfully his: dignity, respect, and the unyielding belief in the power of a single act of defiance. His legacy, paved by a journey of small rebellions and quiet perseverance, lives on in every reform, every policy reimagined, and every human life that has found inspiration in that singular moment of truth. In the end, Marcus Davenport's story is not merely about boarding a plane, it is the story of how one man's unwavering commitment to justice reshaped an institution and, by extension, the very dynamics of human interaction within a modern society. It's a reminder that in a world bustling with routine and protocol, the courage to speak up when faced with injustice is the catalyst that sparks the flames of change, a truth that continues to resonate long after the echoes of that fateful call fade away. With the day drawing to a close and the world slowly settling into a renewed rhythm of progress and understanding, Marcus's story remains etched in the collective consciousness as a guiding light, a vivid example that every setback is an opportunity, every challenge a call to action, and every voice, regardless of its timbre or tone, has the power to change the world. As the curtain falls on yet another chapter in the ongoing saga of human endeavor, one truth remains universally clear: no matter how entrenched injustice may be, the simple act of standing up for one's dignity can, in time, transform entire institutions and, indeed, pave the way for a better tomorrow. This is the story of a man, a call, and the transformative power of unrelenting conviction, the tale of Marcus Davenport, whose refusal to accept an injustice on an ordinary day ultimately reshaped the fabric of corporate culture, igniting a legacy of hope, reform, and unwavering dignity that continues to inspire all who dare to dream of a world where every voice is valued and every soul is celebrated. Marcus's impact did not end with that single fateful flight. In the wake of the airline's transformation, the horizon for Marcus Davenport expanded further than he had ever imagined. As his reputation as a catalyst for change spread across industries, invitations to speak at international summits and corporate gatherings poured in. One crisp winter morning, he boarded a sleek private jet en route to a global leadership conference in Geneva, a new chapter in his journey where ideas and innovation converged in the quest for fairness and inclusion. During the flight, Marcus reflected on all that had transpired since that extraordinary day at the airport. In the quiet hum of the engines, he recalled the myriad of reactions his call had provoked: passionate flyers, determined civil rights advocates, and even dissenters within the industry who clung desperately to traditional models of operation. He knew that any real change was a constant struggle, a series of battles fought not just in boardrooms, but in everyday interactions. Yet what resonated most with him now was the knowledge that his conviction had ignited conversations that transcended the confines of corporate corridors. Upon landing at Geneva's International Airport, Marcus was greeted by a diverse group of delegates, journalists, and industry leaders who were eager to learn more about his journey. At the conference venue, set against a modern glass facade reflective of the optimism of a new era, he found himself seated at a long oval table surrounded by individuals from every corner of the globe. Their discussions ranged from economic reform and customer service ethics to broader issues of social justice and equity. There was an intensity in the air, a shared commitment to reshape institutions that, for too long, had prioritized routine over humanity. As Marcus took to the stage later that day, the room fell into a reverent hush. Dressed simply in a tailored suit and a tie that held subtle references to his proud heritage, he spoke with a clarity and compassion that transcended conventional rhetoric. "I stand before you today not as a man who has earned a rare privilege," he began, his tone both humble and steady, "but as someone who has seen the transformative power of a single act, a single call, a single refusal to accept injustice." His words rippled through the audience, sparking nods of agreement and the soft murmur of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the many struggles faced by countless individuals who felt sidelined by indifferent institutions. During his keynote address, Marcus recounted the events of that fateful day with an honesty that allowed the audience to experience both the indignity of his initial experience and the passion that fueled his response. He described the coldness in the exchange with the counter-agent, the anxiety of waiting for a reversal that never came, and the profound realization that every slight, intentional or otherwise, offered an opportunity to stand up for dignity and fairness. His narrative was punctuated with anecdotes from his early life, where every personal setback had been the crucible for growth and perseverance. In weaving his personal scars into a broader call for change, Marcus managed to paint an evocative picture of leadership that was as much about personal integrity as it was about policy reform. The conference became a melting pot of ideas and action plans. Following his presentation, several roundtable discussions emerged, each focusing on how institutions, be it in aviation, hospitality, or even healthcare, could integrate principles of customer dignity and transparent service practices into their operations. Inspired by Marcus's address, these conversations soon coalesced into a collaborative initiative. This new alliance, dubbed the Global Initiative for Fairness in Service, GFS, aimed to create industry-wide guidelines to safeguard against subtle forms of discrimination and to promote respect as a core tenet of customer interaction. Marcus volunteered to chair the inaugural meeting of GFS, determined to extend his transformative influence far beyond the realm of air travel. In the months following the Geneva conference, Marcus found himself relentlessly in the public eye. His role evolved from that of an uncompromising executive to that of a renowned advocate for diversity and inclusion, a status that enabled him to collaborate with governments, non-governmental organizations, and even controversial industry factions resistant to change. Each engagement provided him with a platform to stress that leadership was not defined solely by corporate success, but by the moral responsibility one carried to ensure that every person was treated with the inherent dignity they deserved. He knew that for some, change seemed to arrive too slowly, yet his steadfast belief was that the slow burn of reformed attitudes would eventually outshine the ephemeral setbacks. One memorable evening, as Marcus hosted a fireside chat in a modest venue in downtown Chicago, he shared an intimate moment with a group of young entrepreneurs and activists. The setting was intimate, a small, warmly lit room with flickering candles atop rustic wooden tables. Over cups of spiced tea, the conversation turned to the day that had changed everything. A young woman, eyes glistening with the excitement of new ideas, asked, "Mr. Davenport, do you ever feel that the weight of every injustice you have fought against becomes too heavy to bear?" Marcus paused, allowing the ember of the question to settle into his thoughtful gaze. "There are moments," he admitted softly, "when the memory of that cold denial of a seat reminds me of how deeply ingrained some injustices are in the systems we take for granted. But every time I look into your eyes and see the fire of change, I'm reminded that every step, even the ones marked by struggle, is a step towards a more equitable future." His words that night sowed seeds of inspiration that sprouted into new projects across cities, community centers designed to educate about corporate accountability, workshops on advocating for policy reform, and grassroots organizations dedicated to ensuring that every consumer received an unequivocal message of respect. Back in the corporate realm, major airlines and service-based companies began to integrate Marcus's principles. Committees were established to audit customer service policies, and a series of international conferences followed, each reinforcing the movement for inclusive service standards. Yet, amid the accolades, Marcus never ceased to be his own most critical reviewer. He spent long hours meticulously reading proposals for reform, often poring over documents that detailed systemic flaws he hadn't yet encountered personally, and many he wished he did. There was an attentiveness in his work that came from an understanding of lived experience. He wasn't simply drafting policies to appease public opinion, but to secure a legacy of tangible change. His office, once the sterile domain of board meetings and quarterly forecasts, transformed into a vibrant hub where ideas were exchanged over walls covered with notes, sketches, and heartfelt letters from individuals whose lives had been touched by his advocacy. As the Global Initiative for Fairness in Service matured, its influence extended into sectors that had previously paid little heed to the needs of their customers. Hospitals began consulting with GFS in redesigning patient interaction protocols, while universities invited its senior members to speak about the ethics of service. A journal dedicated to human-centric operations was even launched, carrying a foreword penned by Marcus himself, which spoke of the limitless possibilities that could unfold when companies embraced equity and humane practice at every level. Despite these advancements, Marcus remained acutely aware of the lingering opposition from those who benefited from entrenched systems. During a tense meeting with representatives of a legacy airline that had been resistant to meaningful change, Marcus encountered a familiar sentiment: the insistence that profitability and efficiency must always trump considerations of service dignity. With calm determination and respectful firmness, he challenged them to see that efficiency, when aligned with respect, could create a virtuous cycle. Happy customers led to robust loyalty, which in turn fueled profitability in a sustainable way. The true measure of success, he argued, is not only found in quarterly reports, but also in the trust and satisfaction of those who place their faith in us. Though the discussion was fraught with ideological friction, a handful of forward-thinking delegates began to understand that the old ways were no longer viable, and that the future lay in the convergence of fairness and innovation, a future Marcus was helping to build. In time, Marcus's story transcended the corridors of corporate skyscrapers and academic halls to be celebrated in community theaters and local radio shows. In neighborhoods across the country, storytellers recounted the day a first-class seat was denied, only to spark a cascade of reforms that redefined what it meant to serve. These retellings were imbued with local flavor and passion, each narrator painting Marcus as a modern-day champion whose voice reverberated with hope. In one community center on the outskirts of Atlanta, a mural was unveiled depicting a stylized image of Marcus on the phone, the background a vibrant tapestry of diverse faces united in hope. The mural became a daily reminder to residents that every individual had the power to challenge injustice, even in the seemingly small moments that punctuated everyday life. Through it all, Marcus maintained his humility. At a charity event held to celebrate the success of the Global Initiative for Fairness in Service, he mingled with everyday people, engineers, teachers, small business owners, and listened as they shared how small policy changes had dramatically improved their experiences in industries they once thought were indifferent to their needs. A middle-aged man from Detroit recounted how a new, more respectful booking process on his favorite airline had restored his faith in corporate responsibility, while a young college student in Los Angeles described how an internship program inspired by Marcus's vision had given her hope for a better future. Each testimonial was a testament to his unwavering belief in the transformative power of justice and respect. Yet, Marcus's journey was far from complete. With each year, new challenges arose, innovative technologies disrupted old business models, and fresh debates emerged about privacy, data security, and digital discrimination. Recognizing that the fight for fairness must evolve with the times, Marcus began collaborating with tech innovators and policy experts to draft guidelines for ethical treatment in digital services as well. He hosted virtual roundtables and engaged with a new generation of digital activists, determined to ensure that even the latest advancements would be guided by the same principles of dignity and equity that had defined his earlier crusade. In his discussions, he often emphasized that while technology rapidly transformed industries, the fundamental human need for respect remained immutable. The delicate balance between harnessing innovation and safeguarding human rights, he argued, would be the defining challenge of the 21st century. In one of his most memorable digital forums, Marcus addressed experts from Silicon Valley alongside civil rights pioneers. The session, live-streamed and watched by millions around the world, was the embodiment of his lifelong message, that progress is a collaborative endeavor, and every stakeholder's voice matters. Marcus stressed that the algorithms and data points of tomorrow must be designed not just for efficiency, but with empathy at their core. He revealed plans to fund a research initiative that would study the intersection of artificial intelligence, customer engagement, and human rights, ensuring that future technologies would be deployed in ways that uplifted people rather than reducing them to mere metrics. His vision struck a chord with tech leaders and humanists alike, sparking partnerships that promised to bridge the gap between cutting-edge innovation and the timeless principles of justice and respect. As the world continued to change, Marcus found solace in the small yet profound moments that punctuated his daily routine: a quiet morning spent reading letters from grateful customers, a casual conversation with a longtime colleague about the next steps in policy transformation, or a reflective walk through a park in which each rustling leaf reminded him of the cycles of renewal in nature. These personal interludes, far removed from the intensity of corporate battles or the glare of public attention, nourished his resolve. They served as gentle reminders that the change he had fought for was, ultimately, about people. It was about ensuring that every traveler, every consumer, every individual felt seen, heard, and valued. Years later, in a solemn yet hopeful ceremony at a state-of-the-art innovation center dedicated to ethical corporate practices, Marcus was honored with an award that celebrated not only his business acumen but his tireless advocacy for social justice. As he stood before an audience of peers, protégés, and activists, he spoke of humility, of the importance of resilience, and of the enduring belief that every single voice can spark waves of change. "We are all connected by our shared humanity," he declared, his voice resonant and full of quiet power, "and every act of courage, every call made in the name of justice, adds another brushstroke to the masterpiece of our collective future." In that moment, as the applause washed over him, Marcus knew that his journey had evolved beyond that first act of defiance into an ongoing commitment to reshape society. His legacy was not confined to the boardrooms of a single airline or the headlines of a singular scandal. It was woven into the fabric of communities, industries, and even emerging technologies worldwide. The story of a black CEO who once had his first-class boarding stripped away had blossomed into an epic tale of transformation, a narrative that continued to inspire people to question outdated norms and to build a future where every individual was accorded the dignity they deserved. And so, as Marcus Davenport moved forward into another chapter of his ever-unfolding story, he carried with him the spirit of that pivotal day. The lessons learned, the friendships forged, and the alliances built in the wake of one courageous phone call continued to guide him in every decision he made. For him, every new challenge was an opportunity to reassert that respect and empathy should be at the forefront of every corporate and technological advancement. In a world where change was the only constant, Marcus's enduring mission was to ensure that progress never came at the expense of humanity. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, a future filled with promise, challenges, and the infinite possibility of collective transformation. In boardrooms, on digital platforms, and within the hearts of everyday people, Marcus's profound belief in the power of a single, determined act continued to resonate. It was the reminder that genuine change begins with one voice standing up for what is just, and that every call, for justice, for fairness, for dignity, has the power to alter the course of history. Thus, the journey went on, a continuing story of resilience, innovation, and a ceaseless drive to honor the intrinsic worth of every human being. As the sun set on another day of progress, Marcus knew that the ripple he had started would one day merge into a tide of transformation, reshaping not only the skies above but the very world below, ensuring that dignity and respect would forever be the cornerstones of human achievement. Marcus's journey, now interwoven with a broader tapestry of global change, continued to evolve as rapidly as the technologies and ideologies shaping tomorrow's world. In a new era marked by the convergence of ethical business practices with digital innovation, Marcus sought fresh opportunities to extend his message of dignity beyond conventional frontiers. Now, serving not only as a seasoned executive and social advocate but also as a mentor to a generation unafraid to challenge the established order, he established an international center for ethical leadership. This center, nestled in a sprawling campus at the heart of a bustling metropolis, became a crossroads of ideas where creative solutions for institutional reform were discussed, debated, and designed. Leaders from varied backgrounds, tech pioneers, community activists, legal reformers, and even representatives from institutions known for their rigidity, gathered there, united by the belief that every innovation should honor the intrinsic value of the human spirit. In the early days of the center, Marcus hosted weekly dignity dialogues, forums where voices from the margins were heard with as much fervor as those from the corridors of power. One such dialogue brought together a group of young engineers with a seasoned civil rights attorney and a former airline customer service manager who had witnessed firsthand the transformation sparked by Marcus's earlier confrontation. Together, they discussed the challenges of managing rapid technological change while preserving the warmth of human interactions. They probed questions such as how artificial intelligence algorithms could be calibrated to honor diversity or whether digital platforms might someday replace face-to-face accountability. Marcus listened intently, nodding as each speaker wove intricate insights from their own fields, reaffirming his belief that the human element was the true engine of progress. His eyes would light up when the discussions veered toward transformative possibilities, a reminder that his journey was both deeply personal and universally resonant. Beyond the walls of the center, stories of change multiplied like ripples across a lake. In small towns and sprawling cities alike, community leaders reported gradual shifts in how service interactions were conducted, from the way airlines designed their booking apps to the narratives local businesses crafted around customer experience. In one notable instance, an independent travel agency in a historic European city launched an initiative aimed at celebrating all customers equally. Their campaign, called "Every Seat is First Class," invited travelers to share their personal experiences of kindness and fairness in service interactions. The overwhelming response to the campaign further validated Marcus's conviction: progress, as slow and tentative as it sometimes was, thrived on the simple, often uncelebrated acts of empathy and courage. Amid these quiet revolutions, Marcus found his schedule hastily filled with new challenges and fresh opportunities for change. Invitations began to arrive for high-profile panels on ethics in emerging markets, and soon he was collaborating with governments on drafting guidelines for digital privacy and fairness. One pivotal meeting took place in a legislative chamber where lawmakers, corporate stakeholders, and community advocates sat side by side. The goal was to craft comprehensive policies that ensured consumer dignity in an increasingly digitized world, a world where algorithms guided not only purchasing decisions but also the allocation of opportunities. Marcus's role in these discussions was both advisory and catalytic. He consistently stressed that the value of a person could never be quantified by data points or efficiency metrics. His heartfelt testimony, laced with personal narratives and historical context, resonated deeply with policymakers, many of whom had grown tired of economic models that failed to account for human decency. Slowly, though surely, his ideas began to shape legislative language intended to protect citizens from the unintended biases of technology. Not all environments, however, were quick to embrace these sweeping changes. In several boardrooms of established corporations that prided themselves on unyielding traditional practices, resistance still simmered. In one particularly tense negotiation, a long-standing airline executive questioned whether increasing customer-centric policies might jeopardize operational efficiency. Marcus, with the calm certainty of one who had weathered countless storms, countered with a simple truth: efficiency without empathy is an empty pursuit. True progress is measured by the trust we earn and the dignity we maintain. His words, delivered with the kind of measured intensity that had come to define his career, gradually softened even the sternest skeptics. Over time, these executives began to understand that a shift toward inclusive practices wasn't merely an ethical obligation, it was a strategic imperative in a world where consumers increasingly demanded transparency and respect. With every passing month, the scales of change continued to tip in favor of inclusivity and fairness. Marcus's Center for Ethical Leadership grew into a vibrant ecosystem where research, policy formulation, and grassroots activism melded into a single, powerful force. Interns and researchers from around the globe contributed studies, innovations, and creative strategies for bridging the gap between technology and human values. In one groundbreaking project, a team of young data scientists developed a digital tool designed to audit customer service communications, flagging language that might harbor subtle biases before it reached the public arena. This innovation, proudly unveiled at an international technology convention, was heralded as a harbinger of a future where data-driven approaches could help mitigate, rather than amplify, systemic inequities. Throughout these chapters of progress, Marcus never forgot the spark that had ignited his lifelong crusade. Each time he encountered a new challenge or witnessed an unexpected act of solidarity, he recalled the icy reception at the boarding gate, a moment that, while deeply personal and painful, had set him on a path toward redefining what it meant to be treated with dignity. In quiet moments of solitude, he would often sit at a park bench near his office, reflecting on the journey from that initial confrontation to the present day. The enduring lessons echoed in each whisper of the wind, that change starts with a single act of defiance, and that every struggle, however small it might seem, holds the promise of transformation. One crisp spring afternoon, as blossoms burst into life around him, Marcus received an unexpected invitation from an international humanitarian organization focused on social justice. They wished to honor him with an award recognizing his lifelong contributions to promoting human dignity, not just within corporate corridors and high-tech summits, but within the very fabric of communities worldwide. The award ceremony, set in a grand auditorium filled with dignitaries, activists, and curious citizens, was a poignant reminder of how far Marcus's single call had come to influence global discourses. In his acceptance speech, delivered with characteristic humility and unwavering conviction, he spoke of a world where every individual mattered, where proactive empathy was as valued as technological innovation, and where the perseverance of one transformative act could ripple outward to touch the hearts of millions. As applause filled the auditorium and flashbulbs captured the moment, Marcus's thoughts drifted back to that early day when injustice had nearly derailed him. Instead, it had propelled him, and many others, into an unending quest for fairness. That quest, once ignited by the refusal to accept a diminished status on a flight, expanded into a larger crusade, one that encompassed the rights of digital citizens, the responsibilities of global industries, and the promise of an inclusive, humane future. His words that day had been measured, but their impact had been seismic, a seismic force that shattered archaic norms and built bridges toward a more compassionate world. In the years that followed, cities and nations celebrated not only the tangible milestones of reform but also the symbolic victories that underscored the power of human resilience. Educational institutions launched new courses on ethical leadership, business schools revised their curricula to include modules on corporate accountability, and countless individuals found themselves inspired to challenge systems that had once seemed insurmountable. Marcus's legacy, though rooted in the specifics of that singular event, transcended any one industry. It was a living, breathing movement, a movement that beckoned every person to challenge indifference with courage, to question injustice with inquiry, and to rewrite the narratives of power with the ink of dignity. And as the sun set on yet another day of progress, Marcus continued his daily routine of mentorship, reflection, and active engagement. Whether he was addressing a small group of local activists in a bustling urban cafe or moderating a high-stakes international panel, his message remained constant. True leadership embraced both strength and kindness, innovation and tradition, all balanced by an unwavering commitment to human value. His eyes, ever fixed on distant horizons, shimmered not with the fatigue of past battles but with the hope of future victories yet to be won. Thus, the journey of Marcus Davenport marched on, a continuing symphony of voices, ideas, and actions intertwined in a ceaseless pursuit of fairness. In every challenge and every triumph, the resounding echo was clear: each call for justice, every stand against indifference, was a step toward a more equitable world. And in that realization, Marcus and those who he inspired found not only a reason to fight but a reason to hope, a hope that no matter how entrenched injustice might seem, the courage of one person could indeed rewrite the future for generations to come.